1, 2, 3, 4. Oh! Here we go. Yeah. Come on.
Good morning, Timothy, and good morning, everybody who is with us on this Sunday morning for Japanese Politics One-on-One with Timothy Langley, the CEO of Langley Esquire, the longest-standing government relations and public affairs agency here in Tokyo, and me, Maya Matsuoka, as the host. Today we're going to talk about internal LDP politics and coalition scenarios. We're going to talk about regional developments in Japan's defense posture, about China's economy, and of course the yen, and some other events that are shaping life and business in Japan at the moment. But I'm not going to take much time. Timothy, it is over to you now.
Great. Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, Japan hands all over the world. Today is August 10th. We are into August now. This is a very significant, meaningful time for Japan. We just passed the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. The bombing of Nagasaki was yesterday, the anniversary there. The end of war is on the 15th, which is, I believe, next Thursday or Friday. And Friday. There is a lot going on. Today is a national holiday, Mountain Day. 2 weeks ago, it was Ocean Day. So these 3-day weekends come up rarely. I think there are probably 5 throughout the year. But I've taken the opportunity to come sailing to the port of Habu on the southern tip of Oshima Island. I was actually headed towards Nijima, which is 3 islands behind Oshima, but a storm has come in, and so I'm hunkered down with several other large boats here who are kind of protecting themselves from the storm. As you know, if you've been a frequent visitor to or attendee to our briefing, Habu is a collapsed caldera. It was a volcano, it collapsed, and then eventually the sea rushed in, and so there's a small narrow channel out to the sea, but I'm tied up surrounded by huge cliffs where the center of the volcano once was. So the storm is building. I'm hunkered down here. Today marks episode 235. So first, let me outline the topics that I'll cover so that you know what's coming and why you want to stay tuned today. Today's key issues in order of my presentation are the yen-dollar exchange. We always hit that first. Monetary policy shifts and why Japan's close at 147.82 to the dollar reflects a subtle market confidence and looming policy moves in Washington and in Tokyo as well. Prime Minister Ishiba's diplomatic and domestic agenda, I'll talk about that, from welcoming heads of state to navigating diet dynamics and the LDP's internal factional maneuvers, plus a symbolic lead up to the August 15th end of war ceremonies. We'll talk about that and then get into that perhaps deeper into the Q&A. Internal LDP politics, it's really consumed this last week. There's a lot to talk about. There are separate coalition scenarios, but if you're following it, you know there's just confusion and indecision that reigns within the Diet. The Moriyama-led reflection period, an 8-day period where he kind of pushed off, let's talk about the prime minister. No, let's talk about the election. Let's analyze what happened there. They bought 8 days. The culmination of that was on Friday. And then they had a big meeting within the LDP. There's growing chatter about the leadership challenges and the position of Komeito, the Democratic Party for the People, and others in the post-election landscape. Let's talk about that. Regional developments in Japan's defense posture. There's an incredible amount of news going on there. A submarine procurement scandal. We talked about that last week. NATO cooperation. But there's been a massive allied exercise in Australia, a growing export profile of Japan's defense industries, and the sale of these battleships to Australia just announced just this last week. And finally, I'd like to wrap up with China's economy and the Taiwan tensions and the shifting balance of deterrence. And, you know, it seems like Beijing's struggles are tempering the likelihood of conflict and what coordinated allied readiness signals to the region. There's a lot going on there. We should talk about that because we're right in the thick of it here in Tokyo. So back to you, Maya.
Thank you, Timothy. And yes, once again, to everybody watching us, this is Japanese Politics One-on-One, episode 235. And we are grateful for you joining us today on this rainy morning here in Japan. If you are watching us and haven't subscribed yet or followed yet, please do let us know that you have been there by hitting like, subscribe, or follow. Also, if you find these briefings informative and helpful, please share them. Feel free to share them with your colleagues, friends, maybe family members, if you have family members who are interested in knowing what is going on in Japan. So thank you very much for this in advance. And we continue now, Timothy. Over to you with the details.
Thank you, Maya. You know that the trigger point for the yen is 150 yen dollars to the yen. That seems to be a kind of a tipping point. The yen dollar ratio closed on Friday at 147.82. So we're about a little bit more than 2 yen, where we get into a little bit of maybe intervention by the Bank of Japan. But it's strengthened mostly from the previous week, last week, and traders in Tokyo are citing cautious optimism ahead of the U.S. Consumer Price Index data, which is coming out next week, and a perceived stabilization of U.S. Treasury yields, which guides a lot. You know, when the United States sneezes, Japan typically catches a cold. The Bank of Japan, while keeping an ultra-loose stance, is under increasing pressure to telegraph any shift ahead of its late September policy meeting. As you know, the Bank of Japan meets towards the end of the month. We're at the end of the month. They had their meeting last week. We reported on that. If you missed that, the recording is on Maya's Japan Experts webpage, and probably on the Langley Esquire webpage as well. But at the U.S. Federal Reserve, there are hints of a slowing pace of rate cuts, which are reinforcing the dollar's resilience. But Japan's strong trade surplus and reduced energy import costs are leading the yen in some support. So there's an interplay of these factors that will be central to a market move over the next quarter. Maya?
Yes?
You're sharing the screen with me, so I wanted to say something.
No, not really. Sorry. Thank you very much. I'll mute myself because I see that my action behind the screen are kind of distracting. So apologies for this. All right.
It's only distracting when you're doing something with your cat.
I know, but my cat is maybe on the other side of the door now. I apologize for that. Right. Okay.
Okay, so let's get into what happened with Mr. Ishiba diplomatically. So we'll talk about his diplomatic schedule and then go into his domestic politics. But it was a high-profile week for Mr. Ishiba. He hosted Peruvian President Dina Boluarte, underscoring Japan's commitment to deepening Latin America ties. There's been a slew of Latin American leaders who have come to Japan, and a lot of that is tied to the expo. So they double down. They visit the prime minister. There has been really no state visit. They haven't compiled it into a state visit and the expo, but I think they're coming here with huge delegations on the day of their showcasing their particular pavilion. So it was Peru's time. There were flags flying all over the prime minister's area and throughout the Diet compound. But he also welcomed a senior delegation of ASEAN ahead of a mid-August African Development Summit, which will be held in Yokohama. Japan is co-hosting with the African Union. This summit is always a big deal. Every 2 years or 3 years they do this. Japan is playing a major role in Africa, and this one runs from August 17th to August 19th, so in the following week. But it'll draw over 40 heads of state and ministers from across Africa. So the prime minister will be really busy. He's busy domestically as well, but he's got a lot of visitors that come in, and he has to give them time. When they come in and they request an audience with the prime minister, he's pretty much duty bound to accommodate that. So it's a really tough schedule, particularly given what's going on domestically. You might remember that last Friday, not 2 days ago, but 10 days ago, the Diet went into session to welcome the members of the upper house who won their new seats. So a new upper house was enthroned. The emperor showed up. Everybody who received their new badges put their new badges on, and the Diet was held for Friday, a lot of pomp and circumstance mostly. Monday, Tuesday, and then closed up on Wednesday. And the parliament or the administration, maybe Mr. Ishiba, took the opportunity to have a budget committee hearing on for the lower house and for the upper house on their respective days. So the lower house meets Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the upper house meets on Mondays and Fridays, Mondays and Thursdays. So they had their budget committee meeting there, but they also had a lot of other things going on. The prime minister presided over the final 4-day diet session before the recess that we're currently in now, and he focused on emergency budget allocation and disaster preparedness, which are his kind of key themes of his administration, and also following some typhoon damage from maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And on Friday, the prime minister attended the critical Moriyama-led LDP leadership meeting, and this was a culmination of an 8-day reflection period on the party's election setbacks and what are we going to do about it and what does this mean. And at this meeting, Ichiro Aizawa, who is a senior LDP figure, was appointed to quietly assess whether there is enough support that exists among Diet members and rank and file members to trigger an election contest. So this is a technique within the LDP charter that says if for a sitting prime minister, for him to be ejected or called back as LDP president, 50% of the Diet members who are in the LDP, so that's maybe 190, 195 lower house LDP members, and then 100 upper house LDP members, 50% of those need to say, throw the bum out. But also, each of the prefectures has a LDP committee, and the 47 committee heads must, or 50% of them also must say, we need a new prime minister. And then the LDP goes through an election process, not unlike what we did maybe 10 months ago or 11 months ago when we had 9 contenders for prime minister. This law came out, or this rule within the LDP came out as a consequence of Mr. Mori being prime minister in 2001, I think. It was a long time ago. And he was just a terrible prime minister, and they couldn't get rid of him. And so they created this technique, whereas if everybody's sick of him, even if he wants to stay around, the members can dictate that there's an election for a new prime minister. And that's the situation that we have now. It's never been used. As a consequence of Mr. Mori, they created it, but they weren't able to use it on Mr. Mori because he was the law or the rule had just been made, and then he was out of office in no time anyway. But the scenario, if right now he was elected or appointed on Friday, today is a national holiday, or Monday's a national holiday, so probably the Diet members are getting together quietly to figure out what they're going to do. But if they're going to ask the prime minister to leave because 50% want him to leave, it's a rather complicated process. You have to get the 50% of the members to agree to it, and then that decision is brought to the Secretary General of the LDP. That's Mr. Moriyama, who just created this 8-day reflection period, who also insisted on having the election where the LDP lost 10 months ago, and he's the prime minister's right arm man. He's the number 2. So if that is presented to the Secretary General, we don't know what his obligation is to honor it or to follow through with it or sit on it or how long it's going to take, that sort of thing. There's been some noise made. Mr. Moriyama did say, we reported here, that he was thinking of resigning. He's going to resign as LDP Secretary General at the appropriate time, maybe after the reflection period. So we were waiting for that to happen. It didn't happen. But also in the meantime, in the diet sessions over the last week, Mr. Ishiba said, if Moriyama leaves, I'm out of here too. So he's so critical, he's so essential to my administration. I don't want him to leave, putting a little bit of the onus of the burden on Mr. Moriyama. So who knows what's going to happen? But like I said, confusion and just indecision reigns within the Diet. We're going to get a little bit of clarity in this next week, but right now it's kind of pretty much up in the air. Mr. Ishiba also completed a solemn visit to Hiroshima on August 6th. He went from Tokyo down to Hiroshima on August 6th. He made a speech there, a pretty important speech where he wants Japan to be nuclear free. He visited Nagasaki 3 days later on August 9th, which was Friday. No, it was yesterday, actually, to attend the memorial services and signaling his intent to deliver a carefully calibrated end-of-war statement on August 15th. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. There's a lot of people who say he shouldn't say anything and it's too delicate. But there will be a ceremony held at the Nippon Budokan, which has a capacity, if you don't know, of 14,000 people. It will be attended, in fact, the main event is attended by the Emperor and the Empress. So although it's not a public holiday in Japan, you would think maybe it is. It's observed nationwide as the day for marking the end of World War II. If you live in Tokyo, Yasukuni Shrine will be inundated with people who leave the Budokan after hearing the Prime Minister speak, after the memorial service, after listening to what the Emperor has to say. And that's going to be highly anticipated. But there will be a flood of people, 14,000 people, in that area. So it's a very compact area. Yasukuni will be packed with people wanting a return to the leadership of the Emperor as the head of state and the embodiment of the Japanese nation. A lot of people on the right side of Japanese politics will be there in force. A lot of the loudspeakers and the uyoku will be in real prominence throughout the city. So be on standby for that. Let's get into the internal LDP politics and coalition maneuvering. For post-election landscape, it remains fluid. There's no really solid direction that we can decipher right now. Inside the LDP, some factions are testing the waters for a leadership challenge, but most insiders agree that Ishiba is politically locked in through the end of August, given the African summit, the World War II commemorations, and the Diet recess. In fact, even if Mr. Aizawa is successful in pulling together, I mean, it sounds like he's motoring it. He's not motoring it. He's managing it. But even if 50% of the LDP members and 50% of the chapters in each of the 47 prefectures decides we want a new prime minister, it can't happen. It's just not going to happen in August. And also, Mr. Moriyama's review acknowledged voter dissatisfaction over economic management, and he has called for improved coalition stability. So what they talked about, and actually when Mr. Ishiba was on the carpet, he was called on in the budget committee in the upper house and in the lower house, 2 successive days. He was pummeled by the Democratic Party for the People's leader there on why he did such a poor job in the election and how he should, take responsibility for that sort of thing. On the other hand, the Constitutional Democratic Party didn't really attack him as much as people expected. So in these Q&A periods in the lower house and the upper house, how much time you are allocated to talk to the administration, particularly the prime minister in these particular instances, depends on how many people you have. So the Constitutional Democratic Party had more time to question the prime minister. So Mr. Noda had a good opportunity. And then the second opposition party, which would be Ishin, and then the third largest opposition party, the Democratic Party for the People. Ishin is starting to cozy up a little bit to the LDP and saying, if you can agree that Osaka will be the go-to capital in the event of some disaster or something to hit Tokyo and the capital needs to move, instead of moving it to Tsukuba, which Tsukuba was basically created to accommodate, Tsukuba is an hour away, huge boulevards, a lot of space for a government that's perhaps suffering from a disaster can move into. Ishin just really wants to aggressively move into position itself as a potential coalition partner. So they removed their number two in command. So the governor of Osaka is the leader of Ishin, and his Diet counterpart is Seiji Maehara. And they just asked him to leave and resign his post to protect internal discipline. So there's a lot going on there for the governor to request his counterpart to resign. I mean, a lot of people didn't really like Maehara as a leader, and they think he's not really fit for the position. So that's why they have two of them. But also the governor can't do the things that a Diet member can do. So they need it's just kind of a messed up situation. But the Constitutional Democratic Party continues to risk these overtures while the Democratic Party for the People remains open to policy-driven cooperation. So everybody wants a peace. It is unlikely that the Constitutional Democratic Party will, one, accommodate a no confidence motion. That looks like it's off the table, especially when there was a little bit of friendliness between the Prime Minister and Mr. Noda on Tuesday. But Ishin really wants to develop this, and Byron, if you're watching this briefing all the time, Byron is 100% committed to Ishin coming in as a coalition partner. I know he's got some things to say about it today, so let's see what he has to say. But the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki, he wants to continue to be open for cooperation, but he sure would like to be prime minister as a consequence of that. So some of this is, hold your nose and drink it, or figure out a different way to do it. But in any event, the LDP is in a very difficult spot. It can't pass legislation on its own. It needs to have 13 other members in the lower house and a slew of members in the upper house in order to pass legislation. So they're in a real pickle. I'd like to move on to Japan's regional developments and Japan's defense posture before I wrap things up. So the security environment here is as active as ever. It is really something to marvel at. There was a submarine procurement scandal we reported on last week where Japan is building these submarines, and the contractors, the Japanese contractors, were kind of trying to schmooze up to the self-defense forces, maritime officials who were in charge of designing and building it. It's not a huge issue. It wasn't the self-defense forces who were criticized. They were criticized for accepting it, but it was the contractors who were kind of pushing the envelope and trying to, entice people with gifts and cash and that sort of thing. So there is a bit of a weakness here. The Five Eyes, people don't trust bringing Japan into the Five Eyes because their security, their cybersecurity is weak. Their leakage of confidential information is not very tight. But the self-defense forces is expanding its capabilities. Tokyo and NATO have announced the first formal framework for defense industry cooperation. We talked about that last week. And this potentially paves the way for joint weapons development, which we saw this last week with the sale of the frigates, the Japanese frigates, to Australia. Not only that, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was maybe a 20-day massive exercise in Australia involving 13 nations, which showcased integrated, ambitious amphibious, air, and cyber operations. This was a big deal. There were about 7 countries that joined for the first time. The Japanese showed up with maybe 2,000 participants, live fire drills, and this really showcases Japan's expeditionary capabilities, the Marine Force, which they haven't really excelled at. Marines go in and take land that was occupied, island hopping, that sort of thing. The Japanese haven't been known for it. The Americans, of course, are. They've got several aspects of that. But the export of the Japanese-built destroyers and patrol vessels throughout the Southeast Asia partners is a milestone for the emerging defense industrial strategy, which we've talked about endlessly on this show. And China's recent air and maritime incursions near Taiwan and Japan's southwestern islands have been met with joint U.S. and Japan patrols and coordination with Australia, the UK, and Canada further signals the depth of the Allies' resolve. There's been a lot of news. I hesitate to talk about it because we are manipulated by news coming from China, by news coming from the United States. You really have to be careful. But China's slowing economy and compounded by its property sector crisis and its weak consumer demand is constraining its military risk appetite. And while the PLA activity near Taiwan continues, and there's a lot of bluster, there's a lot of saber rattling, the probability of an imminent invasion appears reduced, especially given the unprecedented scale of Allied military cooperation now in place that we talk about, what happened in Australia, the frigate sales and joint reaction to oversights or airspace violations. So this deterrence message to China really cannot be ignored. What's going on in China, a lot of different people will say different things about it, but Japan is clearly navigating a period of intense diplomatic engagement. We talk about it at great detail on this program and in our Q&A. And domestic political recalibration and regional security challenges, all of these things really founded on an economic footing which remains very delicate. We talk about the yen, we talk about the tariffs, we talk about trade imbalances. And this convergence of these factors will shape the remainder of the year's political agenda and determine whether the current political configuration holds on to 2026. And with that, I'll end my briefing now. We'll open it up to Q&A. Maya, back over to you. Maya's snoozing.
No, I was trying to clear my throat. Thank you very much, Timothy. And
you're putting your cigarette out before anybody noticed.
Exactly. Yes.
This is not coffee.
Okay. No? Oh,
I'm
no.
teasing.
Oh,
I'm teasing.
sorry. Oh, you're teasing. Okay, I was just surprised. Anyway, so thank you very much, Timothy, once again, and to everybody who is watching us. So please do let us know that you have been here with us by hitting like, subscribe, follow, leaving your comments, questions, and thoughts so that we can talk with you, even though it is not directly just one-on-one. But
and you know what's nice, Maya? So we have a Substack where we publish the briefing synopsis, right? And we don't charge anything, right? We don't charge anything for the briefing or for the synopsis. But there is an option when you sign on for the Substack to donate, right? And many people know we're not going to trigger it. We're not going to open that up. But many people say, yeah, I'll give you $1 billion, if you turn it on. And that's a nice way of saying thank you. And it really encourages us when you do that. But we're not going to charge you for it. But it is nice when people signal to us that they appreciate what we're doing, that they're part of the community, that they're contributing as well.
Yes, very much so indeed. And I'll move on to the questions then. So we've got the first question once again from early this morning from Byron Johnston. Now, let me get there because, well, I know that you were shocked last week too. So
Bro cream.
Yes. Bro cream, yes. All right, so let me read.
So what did Byron have to say today? Byron from DC.
There are two questions. The first one is, it appears that Mr. Ishiba is adamant to stay on as prime minister, while his opponents in the LDP are planning a new LDP presidential election. In the past, have there been prime ministers of Japan who were not presidents of their respective parties? In some other democracies, it is common for the positions of PM and party president to be split between two individuals.
Yeah.
One example is India. So this is the first question.
Okay, let me respond to that. And given Japan's hierarchical social structure, it's always the big guy. The big guy decides. The big guy is the main cheese. And if he's the party president, then he wants to be prime minister. That's the way it goes. That's the way it always goes. So in the Japanese context, the president of the LDP is always the LDP's candidate for prime minister. It doesn't mean that the LDP president is always prime minister. It's happened a couple of times where he's not prime minister, but that's the candidate. And it happens also with all of the other parties. The president of that particular political party is always endorsed as their candidate to become prime minister, whether he becomes one or not. He is the candidate. It happens in the factions too. It's typically the faction leader that is promoted as the candidate to become the prime minister, or when there's an election there. This has changed over these last two elections, where 9 candidates, and Kono Taro is not the president of his faction. Sanai Takaichi is not the president. She's got a group, but no, she doesn't have a political faction. So the dynamics are changing very quickly. So it's a good question, but with regard to the LDP, no, it's always the LDP president who is promoted as the candidate for prime minister.
Yes, indeed. And the only thing, I did a quick search online, and well, basically, since the formation of the LDP, that has been the case. So we cannot go beyond that and escape that reality. All right. And the second question is, also, can you explain the phenomenon of Prime Minister Ishiba's rising public support in polls while the vociferous attacks on him by LDP politicians escalates?
That's a little bit more difficult. That gets into, just supporting, everybody loves the top guy. And unless you do something really bad, people generally stick with you. The Japanese do. They're very loyal, and they know that they don't know the full story. And unless there's something that really bruises their sense of justice or morality, or doing something wrong, they usually hold back. It's the people who aspire to greater positions of power or authority. They're kind of rabble rousing. They're saying he stinks, he doesn't do this, and look what he did here. Sometimes it's enough, but you've got so many people that want to be prime minister that it's the entire thing is somewhat diminished. I don't know if 50% of the LDP Diet members will say, let's kick the bum out. I think that's a high hurdle to make. And it's just, I think in any democracy, even when there's the Democrats and the Republicans and the liberals and the conservatives, it's really hard to go from 50% to 52% when you count the votes. It just doesn't move. That swing doesn't occur very often. It occurred this last time in the upper house elections. It occurred in the lower house elections 10 months ago too. So we are in a period of really dynamic change. So I don't know. Maybe the timing of your question is a good one, Byron. But I think in Japan, typically people stick with what is the status quo.
Right, indeed. Yes, and thank you for that too. Also, I'm moving on to other questions. So the first one here is on YouTube. It came from Hiroaki. And,
oh boy.
Right. Okay, so the question is, please forgive me for being slow in reading it. So here we go. What kind of political agendas could be discussed in the LDP councillor contest, if that contest occurs?
Okay, so what he's asking, I think, is, assuming we decide we're going to kick out the prime minister and these other candidates come up, what are the issues? How are they going to distinguish themselves? What are they going to talk about that people are going to say, oh, that's right, you're the guy, I want you to go with you instead of these other guys? So that's a great question, because the bandwidth is very, very narrow. Are you going to talk about taxes? Are you going to talk about tariffs? Are you going to talk about the emperor? Are you going to talk about, becoming more conservative, returning back to the basic roots of Japanese nationalism? What are you going to talk about? And each of the individuals, Takayuki Kobayashi, Sanai Takaichi, Kono Taro, there are probably even more candidates who will come up this next time So it's going to be rather confusing. And with that many people, people to vote for, it's just going to be, it's kind of related to Byron's question. It's the top dog that's going to remain in position with that much confusion, that much dissension going on. People, I think, would just say, let's stick with what we have. It's not quite broken. We don't like him. He's not very attractive. He hasn't done such a great job with the tariffs, but he's not he's not like Mr. Mori was. So let's wait and see. And also, if it does come out where he is convinced, and he's not convinced, he wants to continue to stay as prime minister until they force him out, it seems to me. You've got standing in the line, you've got Mr. Kishida, who is a great contender. And I think if Mr. Ishiba steps aside, the other ones somehow pale in comparison to Mr. Kishida. He's seasoned. He's been prime minister. He wants to be it. He's got Mr. Aso's presumably support. I think that's a given. So, but we just don't know. We don't know if there's going to be a coalition formed. It's unlikely that the LDP will get into bed with the Constitutional Democratic Party. That looks like it's not going to happen. But the LDP needs something, and some of the people that they're courting are saying, I can join you, but not with Ishiba. Kick him out, and then I can join as a coalition partner with you. That's basically the Democratic Party for the People's position. Ishin is a little bit more flexible. As long as you let us make Osaka the #2 capital, and there's more emphasis put on that, then we're good to go. So a lot of horse trading.
A lot of horse trading there. Yes, that's politics for you.
Yes.
And yes, moving on with the questions on YouTube, we have a question from Greg there. So thank you very much for tuning in, Greg, and everybody else who is watching us on YouTube, of course.
Hey,
so the question is, now that we are in a past faction era, how have the dynamics changed or stayed the same?
So the strength and the value of having a faction has not diminished. Mr. Moriyama, who is the Secretary General, gave up his faction. He actually was the first one to say, I'm giving up my faction. He had a faction of maybe 8 people. It was the smallest within the LDP, but boy, he is a powerful person. I mean, only 8 or 9 people in his faction, and he became Secretary General, and he kind of dictated to the Prime Minister, Mr. Ishiba, this is how you're going to do things, and Mr. Ishiba followed him. So he is a main person, but Mr. Aso continues to hold his faction. He didn't diminish it. He didn't close the offices. They still continue to meet. There are others like Mr. Motegi, and the Abe faction is, I think, just a thing of the past, unfortunately. It was by far the largest, almost twice as large as the second largest faction. But they were doing that by, cajoling people to come join them because there were benefits. There were friends with benefits in the Abe faction. So they were big, they were strong, they were cohesive, and they had a big hold on power. With them kind of fractured and in different components, that leaves Mr. Aso as the #1. It's the largest faction. You could say it's kind of the only standing faction. There are other people who want to have a faction, so they have political groups. They have groups that meet. They're not a formal faction. But factions have fallen out of favor because they just seem, in fact, the LDP has fallen out of favor, as we've seen in the last upper house election results. So we're in a kind of phase of, do we keep factions? Factions have value. It's politics. So numbers, it's all about numbers. So how many people are you going to have compared to somebody else who wants to vote on something or wants to promote something? And that's why the coalition, and that's why this phase that we're in right now, does the LDP and Komeito get in bed with one of the other opposition parties, and how's that going to change the dynamics? It's going to change the dynamics. But I don't know. I think the LDP is in a real soul-searching time, as the Moriyama reflection period kind of highlighted. And now you've got everybody saying, let's get a new prime minister, and I want to be become a candidate for prime minister. And so these next 2 weeks are going to be really full of a lot of seminal news on the direction of the LDP.
Okay, following, there is a follow-up question from Greg, and then I'll move to Mark Kennedy's question on LinkedIn. So here, the follow-up question is, do the Sanseito and Ishin have faction dynamics?
Ishin definitely does. You've got a couple of people in Ishin that really don't like each other, but for the sake of continuity and cohesion, they stick together. But the fact that, first they kind of didn't like the first leader, and then they got the governor and Mr. Maihara as co-leaders, and that didn't work. That lasted 10 months. And so they've got another co-leader in the Diet who is representing the party on the Diet dynamics, and then you've got the governor who continues to hold sway there. But the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki is definitely in charge there. They like him. He's doing a great job. He's very appealing on TV, and I think voters like him. And within the party, you want to be friendly with the leader and not challenge him. It's not that large a party. Collect more leaders, try not to have internal dissension, but there always is. I mean, people who become politicians, they have personalities, they have egos, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to keep that in check. But yes, each of the parties has a kind of a seed of different factions. And it's long been said, if you put 5 Japanese in a room in 10 minutes, you have 8 different groupings, So it's
Yes,
just a
indeed.
natural, it's just a natural part. Sorry
But
about
we
this
also,
loudspeaker.
yes, well, we cannot escape that. But, well, I think it is worth noting that Sanseito is also a new party, and they are still probably in the period before forming any factions there, because they just won the seats in the upper house election. And even though there are probably people who disagree with each other within the party, they don't have a structure yet, right? A clear structure. And then all of that is in front of them. So it is
Yeah.
difficult to say that, and we don't know whether there are any factions there, but thinking about this, let's say the formation of the party and how new it is, probably we're still way before seeing that there.
Oh, yeah.
All
They
right.
have their challenges ahead of them, too, because the candidates that they selected to be a candidate under their banner, they didn't have real time to do correct due diligence. I think the people who won, they know pretty well, but the people that they've attracted to the party, they haven't done a full due diligence and a commitment to the policies of Sanseito, and do you really believe, and are you going to promote our philosophies? They haven't gone through that crucible of real challenge and being tested, and so they're open to attack and to kind of retracing some of their steps in order to find that strong vibe that they need as a viable political party.
All right, and since we are on the topic, there is another question from Hiroaki. Has Prime Minister Ishiba mentioned Sanseito to date?
I don't think he has actually. I don't think so. Interesting question.
Yeah.
I think publicly he hasn't. He's got so many other things going on, and I mean, to be honest, Sanseito is a little bit of a flash in the pan. It's attracting a lot of attention because it's a new party, and it's against the foreigners, or it's presumably against the foreigners. It's got something to say. It rose in prominence, so it's a newsworthy item. But I think it's just a flash.
Right. Okay, thank you. And Mark Kennedy's question is, what is your opinion on whether the Diet will approve the draft bill that would restrict foreigners from purchasing property in Japan?
I think it's too electric an issue for the Diet to come to terms with it. They have passed it. The security laws that they passed last year that's already implemented does allow the government to prevent foreigners from purchasing land near sensitive areas. And I think the criticism of foreigners, it's a little bit complicated. Part of it is because of the tourists. So you can be critical of foreigners as a consequence of that. And the other part are the residents, and the residents are growing in number. The Japanese population has declined 900,000 over the last year, but the influx of foreigners coming in is almost not quite replacing that. So you're getting a lot of foreigners coming in, particularly Tokyo, Chiba, Osaka, where else? There is one other city. All the other cities are being depopulated, and the foreigners are going to those centers of major business. But I also think it's related to the Chinese. There are a lot of Chinese that are coming in with money, their money. They're trying to get out of China, and it could be motivated by the Chinese Communist Party. Please go to Japan and pretend like you're a businessman, buy a hotel. It could be somewhat guided by that, but there's a lot of Chinese money that's coming in, and I think that's really what the Japanese government is, and a lot of the criticism is related to. We've heard comments like that too. I mean, even in social circles where Chinese come in and they're very boisterous and they're loud and they're very prominent and they're flashing their money around, and it's kind of like the ugly Americans of the 60s and 70s, where people were criticizing the Americans for being flashy and loud and that sort of thing. So I don't know if the law needs to be enhanced or better calibrated, but I know that undercurrent does exist.
Right. And also, I think that it is worth remembering that even if there is any enhancement, it will be not against foreigners buying or purchasing property here, but against basically it will be prohibiting non-resident foreigners buying property. Because if the legislation starts discriminating, based on nationality, then Japan is going to be in big trouble there, I think, internationally as well.
Well,
And
this question is from Mark.
from Mark, yes.
Yeah, so Mark is a businessman. He's a prominent businessman doing business in Tokyo. He has a good following on analysis of what's going on, and I think he might be talking about, if you want to start a business in Japan, it used to be that you had to come up with about $100,000 equivalent to launch a KK, right? And then they changed that, and it was like you could start a company for ichi-yen, right? For 1 yen, you can launch a KK. And that's kind of the situation we have now. You shouldn't start a KK with 1 yen. You need to have some paid-in capital to kind of pay your expenses as you go forward. But I think that what Mark might be talking about is that they're considering these foreigners that are coming in and starting a KK, and they're using that as a ruse, are going to be tapped down. And I think from the reports that I read, that they're going to increase the amount of paid-in capital that is required if you're a foreigner to start a KK, which is a big deal.
Yes, there was news about that as well. So that amount is going to increase indeed. Okay. And moving on then, once again from Greg, we've got another question about Sanseito. Is Sanseito a flash in the pan or a Japanese MAGA?
Yeah. I think they're kind of riding on the coattails. I think a lot of people appreciate this fresh, I just got dumped on, this fresh view of Japanese first, Japan first. Why can't we do more of what President Trump did? And look at the changes he's been able to initiate. I think Sanseito aspires to that, and their leader is somewhat dynamic. I don't know if he's got the reputation and the wherewithal. I mean, Trump was a millionaire several times over, and he had a great following. He was able to pull it off. I'm not so sure about Sanseito. You need a leader. You need a somebody to spearhead that. And I know he would like to be. I just don't know if he's got the level of credibility to pull it off. But obviously, a lot of people. The messages that he came across resonated with Japanese people. The other parties are going to pick up on that, and then they're going to change their policy to diminish the impact. But yeah, make Japan great again. I don't know. There's possibility.
There is possibility. Who knows? We'll see. I think that we need to see quite a few other dramatic dynamics or dynamic developments, geopolitically at least, I think, before we see that make Japan great again. But
it's just so hard in Japanese politics for somebody to step out of line and say, "Hey, this is how I feel about this particular issue, and we should do it like this." I mean, how often do you see that? Nobody really takes a stand and really puts their reputation on the line. They just kind of blend in and they make comments, and they try and be on the news and support. But it's all very mealy mouth, right? You don't have somebody that really is offensive like Trump. Trump was terribly offensive, but people keyed off on that. I don't know if Japanese people would key off on that, but in order to generate the kind of admiration and represent the people's voice, it's going to take something really dramatic.
Indeed. All right, and going back to YouTube, no, that's LinkedIn actually. Going back to LinkedIn now. Hiroko-san, thank you very much for your comment and question. So she writes, Mr. Yoshimura of Ishin wants Osaka to be the secondary capital, Fukushuto.
Yep.
And he mentioned about Tokoso. Osaka metropolis plan is a minimum requirement. I am not sure if that is a good idea, as it could be fatal to his political career. What are your thoughts on this, Timothy?
So if you're the Democratic Party for the People, you're Mr. Tamaki, the only thing that will kind of convince me to join your coalition is if you make me prime minister. So far, that's his stance. For Ishin, Mr. Yoshimura, he's governor of Osaka, the second largest city in Japan. He's already powerful in his own right. I don't know if he aspires to become prime minister. But to shift the emphasis from Tokyo, or to share some of that emphasis to Osaka, that would be his gamble. Please pay more attention to Osaka, so eventually Ishin can be really the second opposition party. Tokyo can be really the second capital, and Osaka humor and Osaka food can eclipse what you straight guys and you square, you very boring people from Tokyo kind of dictate to the rest of the nation. Bring in a little bit more of Osaka flavor, because we're really cool. We're far cooler than you Tokyo guys. I think that's the gamble. I think making that resonate, and I mean, they tried that with the Expo, and they tried to encourage the administration, the Ishiba administration, the Suga administration, the Kishida administration. Please help focus on the Expo, so that we can develop Osaka, that Ishin can become a little bit more powerful. They really didn't help them that much, and the numbers reflect that. The Expo has not eclipsed the numbers that it's had in the past, and the central administration has not been that helpful in promoting it globally or nationally. It will do okay, but it's not a knockout, which is what they wanted. So if they can't do it with the Expo, it's difficult to imagine that even if they have a coalition, that Osaka is going to become, they're going to put a couple of the ministry headquarters in Osaka. They've tried a little bit of that. They've moved the cultural ministry to Kyoto. They've done a couple of things with the digital agency and that sort of thing. It's hard to envision.
Right, indeed. Okay, and going back just a little bit to the previous question of Hiroko-san, she wrote also, a follow-up comment there. She writes, Chinese money is purchasing ryokan, Japanese hotels in the
Yes.
hot spring areas.
Yep.
Most of the guests staying in those facilities are Chinese, but they stay in the hotels and never go out, so not boosting the local economy.
Yep.
They also buy sources of natural spring water or property near Japanese self-defense or defense places. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I think these are the concerns that have triggered actually, well, the creation of the law, which you mentioned earlier, Timothy. That was that passed last year or maybe 2 years ago even. I just
That's
don't
right. The
remember
national security law.
the national security law, and also these fears are also fueling some reconsiderations of what well needs to be done further so that these natural resources and also the defense areas, well, the defense forces areas stay away from other, let's say, national security agencies, right?
Right.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for that comment as well. And well, once again, Hiroaki says on YouTube, he says Sanseito doesn't have a national economic growth plan yet. It's very true. Yes, they came like a storm,
They're
and
scrambling.
they're scrambling at the moment. Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. And then with this, I think that we have actually gone through the questions. Timothy, I cannot.
I don't mean to look so happy.
Right. Yes. Yes. We have actually here two comments on LinkedIn from Andrew Goins. He says, I hope I can get to Japan before Japan shuts its borders again. I think that Japan is never going to shut its borders. There will be just better, let's say, immigration control.
Yeah.
And yes, what Rossi Lamont Water writes to that is updated policies designed to better manage non-resident foreigners and hold them accountable for the behavior and effect on Japanese local systems and the population is not necessarily changed that will lead to closing the borders as what we saw with COVID, which was a biological pandemic. Yes, I think that there probably needs to be another black swan event,
Yeah.
global black swan event, before Japan ever thinks of closing its borders. All right, so thank you very much for all the comments. Thank you very much for staying with us on this Sunday morning. Timothy, huge thanks to you because I know that you want to spend time on your boat, probably maybe not go sailing now because the
Can't go
storm is
sailing. We're locked
right.
in, and as you've observed, I mean, the wind is pushing the boat and the sails, and I'm getting dumped on water from time to time. But I'm with maybe 6 or 7 other sailing yachts, and we can't get out of the harbor. This is safe and protected as it's in this kind of walled in canyon. But probably we have to stay here until the storm passes. And then tomorrow we can sail. So tomorrow is a national holiday, Monday. So yes. But today,
Right.
I guess I'll just work on the boat, do maintenance and that sort of thing. Never
And
ending.
you should keep, yeah, you should keep quiet, right? Because if you're too noisy, too loud, then they may throw you out of port.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
could.
they
Yeah.
could. Yes, okay, sorry. And then that's all for today. Once again, it was a pleasure having you with us, Timothy.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
thanks a lot to you as well. And again, please tell your friends, share these briefings with them and colleagues, of course, if you find them useful, informative, and we'll be happy to have you with us once again next Sunday. Yes,
Spread the
Timothy?
love.
Spread the love, indeed. Okay, that's great. And enjoy the weekend. Tomorrow is a holiday again here in Japan, so I hope that you have a great day and a bright new week as well.
Whoa, here comes the wind.